Tranmere Rovers 4, Chesterfield 0. The Spirates' 6-game unbeaten run is over, and it ended in rather spectacular fashion. We'll be unpacking that very, very soon, as well as looking ahead to Tuesday night's game against Gillingham, which now arguably takes on even bigger importance after that result. But just before we do, of course, thank you for all the support over the videos over the past few weeks. It's massively, massively appreciated, as will be any support down the remainder of this run-in. Really getting into the crunch time now. Every game, every point matters, and looking forward to delivering some content around these final few games of the season. Of course, if you want to catch me in between videos, Twitter, TikTok, Medium, all those other relevant links will be down in the description as always. But with that out of the way, let's dive straight in to having a look at this game, and of course start where we always do with the Chesterfield starting 11 for the game up at Tranmere on Saturday lunchtime. And in terms of what we discussed in the preview, a bit of a mixed bag in terms of what we got right, what we weren't quite able to predict. Did say that if John Fleck and Will Grigg were going to make way, that Tom Naylor and Ben Peppel would likely be the two that came in. That was the case. What didn't happen, however, was a start for Cal McFadzean. He just came back onto the bench rather than into the starting 11. Paul Cook opting to stick with what has been the kind of quite settled centre-back partnership over the past few weeks of Ash Palmer and Jamie Grimes. Whatever the case for Chesterfield, it obviously didn't quite work, judging from the scoreline. Pretty emphatically able to deduce that one. So I guess the question is why and how did the game unfold? And that's what we'll get into very, very shortly. And before we go any further, I think we have to give significant credit to Tranmere Rovers and how they approach this game. Of course, Chesterfield, there's bits to unpack. Certainly were the architects of their own downfall in certain moments, particularly with some of the goals that they conceded. But I think you do have to give a significant amount of credit to Tranmere. I thought without the ball, they were very kind of proactive in their press, shutting down Chesterfield. I think that kind of forced some of what we saw in the second half. I think the fact that Chesterfield couldn't really get things going on a consistent basis really kind of start to kind of wear down their confidence. It forced mistakes. It caused some kind of, I don't want to kind of analyse and kind of speak for, of course, can't speak for what was going on mindset-wise for Chesterfield, but it did just seem that they just kind of had their confidence knocked a little bit by not being able to settle in their rhythm and get things going. Then particularly that, of course, amplified that effect when Tranmere were able to get in front. I thought with the ball, Tranmere were kind of quite intelligent in how they kind of analysed some of Chesterfield's potentially weaker areas and sought to exploit them. I thought one, which you can, if you've either watched the game or watched the highlights or however you follow this game outside of this video, you've probably seen the second goal in particular. I thought they really used Amari Patrick on the left wing really well, of course, up against Liam Mandeville at right back. Not necessarily a natural right back. And for as much as he's been a great servant and filled in there pretty admirably at various points over the past couple of seasons, it isn't necessarily his natural position. He maybe doesn't have some of the kind of agility and kind of natural pace, if you like, that you'd want of a right back up against kind of a wide player like Patrick, and I think that did show at various points throughout the game. Of course, most, as we said there, most kind of relevantly for Tranmere's second goal. Thought another kind of little tactical bit that they did very well was get Cameron Norman from right back, bombing on from that right back position. I think, and obviously again, this is kind of tiptoeing into the realms of speculation, but I think the plan was always for Chesterfield for Michael Olakigbe to stay high. I can't imagine it was something that he was kind of going rogue and doing kind of off his own back, because if he had, I don't think he'd have lasted as long in the game as he did if he was kind of actively not tracking back. I think the plan was for him to stay high and use him as an outlet, as a counter-attacking threat, which did work on a couple of occasions for Chesterfield in the first half. But the counter effect to that was that when no one was able to kind of make these runs down the line from right back, there was nobody really tracking them, and I think they did use that as an outlet. And I believe, of course, I'm sure Tranmere fans will correct me, that whoever kind of sponsors, I assume, whoever hands out their kind of man of the match award that was announced over the channel, who did give it to Cameron Norman. I think his ability to influence the game on the right, particularly, as I say, making use of that overlapping opportunity, would have been a big part of that. So yeah, I thought there was several bits from Tranmere to be kind of impressed by. I think Andy Crosby's done a very, very good job in his interim spell, and this probably his most impressive result yet. Now, again, of course, I'm more familiar with kind of the situation at Chesterfield than I am up at Tranmere. I don't know whether Andy Crosby has expressed an interest in taking the job full-time. Of course, I still believe, as of the last I was aware, at least he's still there on an interim basis. So whether he's interested in the full-time job, I don't know, but it's certainly been a very good audition so far for the large part. Of course, suffered that one defeat at Harrogate on Tuesday night just before this Chesterfield game, but on the whole, a very good audition from him, and this probably the most impressive result. So credit to Tranmere. Can't really argue at all, really, with the result. I think on the strength, particularly, their second half showing they deserve to win, and they deserve to win pretty handsomely. That is ultimately what happened. So back to Chesterfield, of course, that's what I imagine the majority of you are here for. What do they do? Where do they go from here? And really, looking ahead to this Gillingham game on Tuesday, it's a bit difficult to say, really. We've always got kind of the opposite dilemma as to what we've had throughout kind of the last few weeks when they've been on this 6-game unbeaten run. In terms of players coming back into the squad, or maybe those that have been on the bench for a while and you might want to get more minutes to, in terms of how do you feed them into the team? Who do you drop because everybody's playing so well? It's almost the opposite dilemma we've got now, trying to predict the 11. It's who's going to stay, because it was a kind of pretty damaging defeat. Of course, not terminal, but I'm sure we'll talk about more in terms of what it means for Chesterfield's potential playoff hopes. But it's definitely damaging, and potentially damaging in terms of morale as well, not just in terms of that playoff portion. And not that I think for a second he's actually going to do this, but if Paul Cook changed the entire 11, I don't think people could have massive kind of grievances or disagreements with that. So the question is, how are we going to work out who's going to play? And like I said, there's a lot of margin to be wrong, shall we say, because it is a bit more up in the air, with this probably marking a real opportunity for Paul Cook to make some pretty sweeping rotation. But we're going to give it a go, and we'll start kind of first of all with the changes that were made for Saturday's game. Of course, we'll start mainly with John Fleck and Will Grigg, because kind of reading between the lines, it does seem like they were rotated with this kind of game on Tuesday in mind. So you'd imagine, particularly seeing as they didn't play for the majority of the game and it didn't go particularly well, that they will come back into the 11. It could just be kind of the straight swap again, that they come back in for Naylor and for Peppel. But I do wonder whether Chesterfield, particularly midfield, might try something a little bit different. Take out Jensen Metcalf, who I thought had a solid run of games, probably his best run of games in a Chesterfield shirt, but not his best. I mean, not that he was on his own at all in that regard, but not his best up at Tranmere. So I do wonder whether they could bring John Fleck in and play more as that deeper defensive midfield. But it's not necessarily a reflection on Metcalf. I just think that because John Fleck has shown the ability to be that real kind of orchestrator of play from deep, because I think we saw that a couple of times in that win over Carlisle United. Of course, his first league start for Chesterfield, was named the supporters player of the match, so made a very, very big impression. For what was his first start, played a couple of very eye-catching balls through to Michael Ola-Kigbe. I remember when he earlier on in the season he came on for a cameo. I think it was against Bromley, and he got an assist for Paddy Madden with a lovely through ball. So definitely has that ability to kind of make those line-breaking passes and push the team forward. And why I think that's so useful is because at the moment we are seeing a couple of times against Barrow, and particularly relevantly in this game against Tranmere, Ollie Banks kind of having to drop deep and kind of assist in build-up, and that means that because there's an extra midfielder dropping deep, it's usually been Tom Naylor that's been told to kind of push onto this right wing position. What a strange season, really, that Tom Naylor has had. Of course, last season was the kind of consensus, really, player of the season pick for Chesterfield, playing predominantly in defensive midfield. This season, not really been the case. He'd had to fill in at centre-back a lot due to a whole host of injuries there. And now, at the moment, as we say, whilst he kind of starts games and drops in a little bit defensive midfield, there's been a couple of times over these past 2 or 3 games where he has spent most of his time out on the right wing. So a player that's played at centre back and right wing this season. I can't think there's been many of those throughout the Football League. But I don't think it's something that's particularly working for Chesterfield, particularly with Liam Mandeville playing at right back. I think there was a couple of times in the second half when Chesterfield were trying to conjure something to get themselves back in the game against Tranmere, that things would just break down on this right, because particularly with Olakipe playing over on the left, who I think had a bit of an up and down game. I thought he was quite good in the first half, then not so good in the second half, but once again not on his own in that aspect at all. But on this right hand side, with no kind of natural kind of overlap or something that's going to take him on beating the pace, things would just break down. I don't think it's particularly working for Chesterfield, this dynamic. So having Fleck there to be that orchestrator kind of frees Banks to stay that little bit higher, and it then frees Naylor to not have to drift and kind of take Banks' spot out on the right hand side. And I do understand. Don't let me be clear on this. I do understand the rationale of having Tom Naylor stationed a little bit higher up in the build-up phase. That absolutely does make a degree of sense, but I don't think he's necessarily suited to being stuck out on the right. I think it does leave Chesterfield lacking a bit of punch on that right hand side. And it takes away his best element, which is kind of these box-to-box shuttle runs. When you saw him at his best against Notts County, he was able to stay that little bit more centrally and then pick his moment to burst into the box, kind of be the extra man supporting the attack and kind of arrive late and make things happen. Of course, scored that way against Notts County, and that's probably, I would say, the best we've seen of Tom Naylor this season. It's where we saw him at his best last season when he had that brilliant season that we mentioned. So that's what I think why Fleck playing that little bit deeper and coming in to replace Metcalf could kind of just make the whole team click that little bit more. In terms of up front, I do think Will Grigg will come back in. I wouldn't really argue if Ben Peppel started again, to be honest, because I do think he was one of the better performers again, relative term, at Tranmere. Particularly in the first half, I thought he was battling really, really well. Sometimes up against one or two defenders, he was shrugging them off and driving Chesterfield forward, really dragging them up the pitch almost single-handedly at times. So I don't think his performance was too bad, and if he played, I wouldn't be against it, but I do think that the onus will be on getting Will Grigg fit and firing. Should Chesterfield still make that playoff run, they'll want him to be up to speed, so I think they will try and give him some more extended minutes in this game. I think he is likely to come in, as I think will Carl McFadzean. I know we pitched this before and it didn't happen, but having conceded 4 goals, I think this really is the time, if Paul Cook wants to change it, that he will, and all the kind of conversations that we had before still apply in terms of wanting to get a look at McFadzean, get him up to speed again before the end of the season. I think if you're going to make changes, your players have kind of probably understand it to a degree. I'm not saying they'll be happy with it, of course. I don't think any player wants to not play, but I think they can understand it if they've been part of a defensive unit that shipped 4 goals. So I think this might be the ideal time to get McFadzean in place of, again, I'm going to say Jamie Grimes, but could be Ash Palmer possibly. But again, for the reasons we spoke about in the kind of Tranmere preview, I think it could be Grimes to make way for Carl McFadzean. Another option, potentially, could be Harvey Arajo. Paul Cook alluding to the fact that he could be fit for this game, kind of in his pre-match to the Tranmere game. I've not seen, and I might have missed it again, kind of the quick turnarounds, not kind of having as much time to digest everything. Could have missed it if there's been a further update on Arajo, but it was said that he could be involved on Tuesday, so there's another option. You could change both of the centre-backs, but I would just put him on the bench for now, just because against the Gareth Ainsworth team, I again, quite early on to say in his time at Gillingham exactly how they're going to look, but typically they've been teams, particularly up against kind of heavy possession-based sides, which Chesterfield are. They've typically been a team that try and play that kind of more direct physical game, and that's somewhere where Arajo has struggled a little bit. He is a promising young defender, really good kind of for the kind of modern aspects of defending. Has that recovery pace which allow you to play as a team on the front foot and have that little bit more security, and he's quite good bringing the ball out of defence as well. But the one area where he has struggled on a couple of occasions, there was a game at Morecambe away where he was taken off at half-time, and another one kind of not long after that where he was kind of struggling with the physical battle and he was withdrawn. So I think keeping Palmer in there on Simon McFadzean for this game could be the play. And also I think it does bring you kind of some nice versatility and some options off the bench rather, because he can also slot in and do a job at left-back in place of Lewis Gordon if needed. One final change I am going to pitch for the defensive unit, though, is Vontae Daly Campbell. Had to shorten his name there to get his name to to fit kind of on this kind of tactical screen that I'm using. I think bringing Daley Campbell in here does make sense. Again, it wasn't Mandeville's kind of most comfortable game up at Tranmere, so having that more natural right back, and again, having that proper overlapping threat, which Daley Campbell did prove, particularly towards the start of his time at Chesterfield. Again, another that has been really disrupted by injuries. But his first few games when he came in against Crewe Alexandra, especially when Chesterfield won 5-0 away, Daley Campbell getting high and wide on the right when needed was a big part of making everything tick. I think it was Dylan Markande that played on the right wing that day, and he was allowed to drift in and get on the ball and be an absolute menace. I mean, it was an incredible debut. Obviously now gone on to move to Leyton Orient, where things haven't quite worked out for him, but had an incredible loan spell at Chesterfield, and it was an incredible debut. And part of that was because he was given the freedom to get inside and get on the ball and beat players, because Daley Campbell was there providing the width. So I think that could be an interesting option. Of course, last week, he was added to the squad pre the Barrow game, but obviously because he's come back to fitness, it looks like they're using some reserve team games to get him back up to speed. He did play on a reserve team game last Tuesday when Chesterfield played Carlisle United. So if there is a reserve game scheduled, I kind of forgot to double check before hitting record on this, but if there is one scheduled, keep your eyes peeled for that team sheet, because if he's not involved there, it would suggest that he could be involved in the first team, and I wouldn't be surprised if, again, this is the moment that they pick to give him a go. Now, if he is going to play, that gives you the opportunity to play Liam Mandeville further forward, possibly. But I think also, again, having had a little bit of a rough game, and maybe kind of, he's played a lot of games recently, maybe that this is the moment where you do give him a rest and potentially drop him onto the bench as well. And similar to Arajo, that gives you kind of some very nice versatility off the bench, because he can come on and fill in at right back, he can fill in midfield, he can fill in this attacking midfield three as well. So this is the 11 that I'm going to pitch, but I'm not going to call it like a firm prediction, because again, after a 4-0 defeat, this really does feel like a chance where the slate could be wiped and really anybody is in play. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Chesterfield line up for this one. How they fare. Of course, as we kind of alluded to briefly, this game now takes on much more, well, it was always a significant game because this is Chesterfield's game in hand, but now they absolutely, you feel, have to win this game. Obviously, the gap has now gone back up to 7 points. It could have gone to just 1 point on Saturday lunchtime. Of course, Chesterfield having one of the earlier kickoffs, they could have really put the pressure on those other teams playing at 3 o'clock. They didn't. Some of those teams then picked up results, and now Chesterfield are looking at a 7-point gap once more. With this game in hand, you feel like they absolutely have to win it. 4 points, still going to be a big ask with just 5 games to play after this one, but you do feel like they're going to have to win this to give themselves half a chance. So a big game of Chesterfield. Going to be interesting to see what they do, if they can bounce back from this. Sorry, this video has been slightly all over the place, and that there isn't too much opposition analysis. Again, obviously working on a very quick turnaround once more, and trying to almost cram 2 games worth, or at least a post-match and a preview into one video here. So thank you very much, regardless, if you have made it this far. If you have enjoyed it, of course, we should be back to some more in-depth kind of opposition analysis in these previews once we get down to a more settled schedule again. But thank you very, very much for watching. If you have enjoyed it, of course, any likes, shares, subscriptions, massively appreciated, and should be back hopefully later in the week to talk about Gillingham, the how this Gillingham game has played out, and then hopefully again to talk about a preview for the Fleetwood game at the weekend. Might combine those videos. We'll have to wait and see just how things shake out for the remainder of the week. But thank you very, very much in any case, and hopefully I will see you in some form very, very soon. So thank you very, very much for watching. Goodbye.